All right, then I'd say we start and kick off this session. Welcome, everybody. Great that you are here, that you made the time this afternoon to discuss this very important topic of Indigenous perspective into research. I'm Neele van Bongardt from the Amsterdam Sustainability Institute. We organize and host these sessions. It's our regular lecture series in which we discuss different different topics related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And we are a network here at the university, the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, an interdisciplinary research network on sustainability. So we connect the researchers of our university with each other, but also with external stakeholders. So I'm also very happy that today we have an external speaker on our panel. And with that, I would also like to give the floor to Lisa. Just before, if you want to know more about other events, other activities, you can sign up for our newsletter or follow us on LinkedIn. We have lots of more events coming up. For example, an event on the Biodiversity Day that's on the 22nd of May, and also in a workshop at the end of June on mining in Latin America. So if you want to know more, we'll post more information in the chat. And with that, I give the floor to Lisa. So take it away.
Yes, thanks a lot, Neele, and hi everybody. Great to see you. At least a few of you I can see here on the top screen. My name is Lisa Ausic. I'm based at the Anthropology department here at the FU, and together with Milica and Neele, I will be hosting this event today. My own work is also a bit related to the topic today, which is integrating Indigenous knowledges and perspectives into Western or so-called Western frameworks and scientific research. Of course, in recent years, in the public discourse, there has been a lot more push towards doing this, especially when it comes to tackling the climate crisis, imagining and crafting relationships among humans and also with the planet that can sustain life and make life flourish in a better way. But as with everything, there are also always some pitfalls to consider here. And today we're going to be having two very lovely speakers who are going to be doing exactly this. So on the one hand, we will be talking about the importance and the relevance of integrating Indigenous perspectives into Western frameworks and research. But we will also be very concretely talking about the do's and don'ts of working with Indigenous collaborators in a way that is more ethical, that is just, and that does not perpetuate research as extraction and as another form of colonialism, and also in a way that perhaps helps us to rethink a little bit the colonial hierarchies of knowledge systems that there still exist and in which Western science has kind of remains on the top, right? And perhaps as one small disclaimer before I would like to introduce our speakers today, the title for today's sessions, of course, today's session, of course, states that we will be looking at Indigenous perspectives, but Indigenous, as you know, is a very, very broad term. Indigenous peoples and Indigenous people also within their own communities are very, very diverse. So our speakers today are going to be speaking from the experiences that they have had with the communities that they are involved in. So this is not a one-size-fits-all discussion, let's say, but of course, by speaking from the experiences that they have had in working with Indigenous peoples, they're also going to be tackling these larger issues and problems and solutions that are relevant in other contexts when it comes to working with Indigenous peoples in research. And then I'm happy to introduce our first speaker for today, which I think is going to be Myra. Yes, I see Moné is arriving a bit later. So I'm happy to introduce Myra Colis, our first speaker for today, who is an expert on AI and international technology law, for which she also holds a master's here from the FU. And she is also an Indigenous Igorot person. And in her work, she combines her advocacy for AI ethics and governance with her role as an Indigenous community leader. As such, she's also the founding chairperson of the Mabicas Foundation here in the Netherlands, perhaps an interesting foundation for everyone to check out after the session. And she has very much dedicated herself into integrating indigenous perspectives, Igorot perspectives, into movements for decolonization, regeneration, sustainability, and social impact. So Myra's aim very much is to bridge, sort of the traditional indigenous knowledge and also modern innovations. And she does that through a lot of partnerships, collaborative research, and speaking engagements. And for this, she also works with many, many different stakeholders. For instance, she's involved also with educational institutions, different businesses, policymakers, you name it. She has also recently introduced a new platform that is called Inayan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Myra can correct me on that perhaps, which is a new platform or initiative that tries to integrate indigenous perspectives into AI development and governance. So something super, super pressing, interesting and relevant. And yes, so Myra is going to be presenting for 10 minutes. Then we have some time for questions. And then we will have a look at if Moné is here. So floor is yours, Myra.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you everyone for coming this afternoon. It's so nice to see you. Hopefully we get the chance to also meet in person. But for now, yes, this is a chance for us to discuss about this important topic. Let me share to you my slide. I hope you can see this. Yes? Okay. So, as you have introduced Lisa, so I'm the project lead of Inayan and also chairperson of Mabicas. And for this short time, I'd like to break down my presentation into 3 points, which would be this one. The topic itself is about integrating indigenous perspective into ethical and reciprocal research. So I'd like to break down my topic into 3, particularly on research. So when we talk about research, what kind of research are we really talking about? Because in dominant systems like in the Western society we live in now, research is often framed as neutral or objective, but in practice it's actually shaped by a deeply very individualist and extractive mindset. We can go further with that later. Second point is about the indigenous perspective itself, which I think Moné will also be able to speak more later. But on this point, I would like to emphasize that when we talk about indigenous perspective, it's not just about the content itself, but it's a whole different worldview. Because when we talk about indigenous perspective, these are often treated as just an alternative or as an add-on or as just an afterthought, right? But in reality, they actually represent a more radically different way of knowing. And the third part of this presentation would be more about the integration, like are we including or are we transforming? So this will be the 3 points. So without so much further ado, in the area of research, on this topic, there are really a lot of things I wanted to share, but an overview is, as you can see on the slide, it seems a bit... So this is the dominant research logic that we have. So when we talk about this, I'd like to illustrate my point by just going or reviewing the key elements that I'm sure most of you know, which is involved in the process of research. So we have here the topic. We also have the method of research, how do we structure it, and the outcomes. So simply put, when I talk about the topic, oftentimes this is driven by the gaps in existing literature, right? It's not really about community needs, but it's more about prioritizing a novelty or scientific contribution over ethical relevance or real-world impact or solving problems. And sometimes the knowledge is segmented into academic silos, you would say, like sociology, ecology, anthropology, and all the G. And this kind of limit the holistic or relational understandings. And so the focus always, of course, theoretically framework is also often Eurocentric, decontextualized. When it comes to method, I would say researchers is expected to be a neutral observer, so not really embedded accountable in the community that is being studied. And the method, I would say, is also kind of detached, or it's just standardized. A structure, we also, of course, we think about research institutions or universities and think tanks where they kind of like define legitimacy. Sometimes also when we talk about funding agencies, they are the ones that influence what topics get to be explored or what topic is going to be prioritized. And so structurally, this is institution and driven by funders. And as the outcome, we just look at publication, policy influence, and innovation. So more of the benefit of the researcher or the funder rather than, what is the impact in the community. So for that, I think we kind of like see that this is an overall research logic in how we see the research system. If I have to add the indigenous-centered alternative, it would be this. So when we talk about topic, it would be nice if we only also include community-defined priorities, not just the interests of the funders or institutions that are sponsoring all these research initiatives. And when it comes to method, yeah, we always look into the relational, reciprocal, land-based, of course, because without the land, our existence is also in question. So there you go, always the question on ethics, a richer understanding of this part. And so unlike in the previous one, the structure is institution-based. If it's from the indigenous perspective, maybe it's more co-creation or led by the community itself, and of course indigenous researchers when we are talking about topics on indigenous related. So there's this kind of shared ownership and shared ownership in this sense. The outcome, if we talk about indigenous center alternative, is that the knowledge is not only for us now, or it's not only for the researchers, or it's not only for the institution, but it's for the next generation. So we have the 7-generation principle that whatever data or knowledge gathered now, it's for the next generations to come as well. So it has more a long-term impact and, of course, benefit to the community in general. So that's about the research itself. And the second point on indigenous perspective, here, it's always a question when we talk about indigenous perspective and indigenous people and indigenous knowledge. The first question is always, what is indigenous knowledge and who are these indigenous people? And I think Moné will further discuss that in the second speaker. But from this point, I would just say that when we talk about indigenous perspective, these are not just views, but rather they represent a whole orientation to life that is grounded in a relationship with one another, of course, responsibility and also sustainability. So the core principle here is when we talk about mindset, the mindset is that we understand in indigenous culture, we have this understanding that we exist in relation to each other, to the land, to the water, and all living creatures. So unlike in dominant system, we are very individualist in nature, and it's like we only look after our own interest. So when it comes to responsibility, with this awareness of our interconnectedness, of course, we have this a sense of duty, yeah, like when we empower others, that means we also protect the system. If we empower others, we also empower ourselves. If we protect the environment we live in, the land that we are on, then we are also protecting ourselves. So that's the kind of relation, and that's the kind of responsibility that is linked to this kind of mindset. So in the end, as a result of these two principles, we have this giving back is not optional. I mean to say it's already embedded in our mindset that giving up is a built-in value. So reciprocity is a way of life, and it's not just an afterthought. Because also from our perspective, we believe that without reciprocity, as we can also see nowadays, greed, everyone turns out to be greedy for profit purposes, for economic gain. So greed takes the lead if there's no reciprocity. And as you can also imagine, this kind of greed leads to scarcity, and it leads to collapse and even an extinction. And that's what's happened nowadays. So in terms of integration, when we also speak of indigenous perspective in the context of research or knowledge systems, we are referring to far more than just a viewpoint. It's more than a contribution. So like I said, this kind of principle, and this is something more of how would I say, it's more of like a call to transform. So we are not just when we talk about integration, it's not just about, oh, please include us, please add us. It's actually more a call of transformation because of the kind of system that we live in now. So it's very easy to assume that we mean simply adding or including, but that's not what we meant by this. So when I say integration, it must begin with a pause, some kind of like we step back for a while. So we have this conscious act of zooming out and asking ourselves, what kind of system are we participating in? What values does it promote, or what values does the system that we are participating in promote, and at whose expense? So here in academia, in the topic we're talking about, I've also already shared this on my on my LinkedIn, just sort of like already share my idea, because here we are trained to accept certain norms as unquestionable. So I would just want to read this. So like, for example, the call for papers, the call for submissions, the conferences, symposiums, special issues, oftentimes they come out to us as prestigious opportunities, yes? But if we be honest to ourselves, how often do we really stop and ask for whom are these opportunities designed and who benefits the most? And I have this example here of a letter I received about asking to be interviewed. But because before I go to this sample here, because don't read this first, just listen to me for a while. So I'd say the researcher is often underpaid, overworked, and precariously employed, even though she spends months and years on developing knowledge. And then when it comes to sharing, when they are invited to speak or present, they don't really get anything back tangible. So oftentimes there's no compensation, no royalties. Sometimes they even have to pay for their own travel cost, or even access the final publication where their work is being published. And so even in that case, the researcher has to feel still very thankful, right? Like as if they owe the system a debt for the chance to contribute to the content to someone else's platform, like the conference or journals. So in the world of conferences and journals, researchers have become content providers, sometimes without rights, without reciprocity, and even without voice. And this imbalance is not only unfair, but it's also a systemic extraction in a polished academic form. And sadly, the pattern actually doesn't stop there, because if that's the system, it follows that the researchers also follow that kind of mindset. So when they look for interviewees for their research work, they also have this kind of mindset that, oh, I ask you, so you should be grateful that you are included. And in the end, there's also nothing received by the people they are interviewing, right? Like, may they be migrants, may they be indigenous people, may they be also local expert. Oftentimes they they also don't get anything in return. And researchers also often expect access to people's stories, to their knowledge and their time as if it's owed to them. And that's one example I have here, because this is a typical email I receive. Like, if you don't mind, I will just write and then see the tone. Yeah. I'm writing to invite you, your foundation, to participate in this research. But what I didn't want this. Okay, the focus about this research is this, blah, blah, blah. The time is this, the duration is this, the English. So this session is all about this. If you're interested in participating, please fill out the form. The flows close on 20th March. And if you are happy, I'd be, what do you call? As you have, I would be happy if one person could join, blah, 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 blah. Punt. Sincerely, you're truly the researcher. But in this kind of, what struck me most in this kind of email is that as if you expect the person to really like, oh, meet this deadline, meet this criteria. You haven't even asked, do you have time? Would you be happy to contribute? Okay, is this topic very interesting? So of course, when this kind of email comes to me, I said, what does this person think? Does they think that you know? But I cannot also blame the person, because I think that's how the system works, and we are used to this kind of system. And even as we approach potential interviewers, we already think that we own their time, we own their knowledge, and that they should share their knowledge and expertise in their own this way, this kind of letter. But anyway, I would say that this kind of like the colonial method, which is packed in a participatory research, repackaged in a name called participatory research. And so we rarely ask the question of so when going back to the researchers who are operating in this kind of extractive system, and they work so hard, and it's also okay for them to be published even if they don't get compensation, but they don't also question why, even if they don't get a compensation. Why don't they speak up? Because this is what we are taught how it works. Yeah, but deep down inside us, it's not really okay. So the point is, the absence of reciprocity is not just a small oversight. It's actually a sign of a deeper rot in our system, a system that treats people as data and our ideas as currency, and the knowledge as a product to be mined. And without reciprocity, of course, we can imagine things would break. Yeah, if we don't give and take, relationships would break, trust breaks, communities break, and yes, even the sustainability of knowledge itself can break. Because what is not nurtured, it always dies. And when it dies without dignity, there's always this pain and the silence of exploitation. So what now then? What does integration actually looks like? So in response to that email, by the way, this is what I said. The response of this email, I said, thank you very much for your email. Your research topic is very commendable. And while I find the research valuable, blah, 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 please allow me to raise a concern. So I just, as a person, I think it's very important to be direct, be direct to the point, and also at the same time be compassionate and kind in relaying the concern that you have, because it fires back when you attack right away. So I think I was nice in my email. And I said, anyway, I want to say that this is how the tone of your email crossed to me. I said here, it really reminded me of the colonial era thinking, where indigenous knowledge and perspective are approached differently from fields like STEM or business, which is true. It is often the case that when we receive requests to share, like if I'm talking about indigenous people myself, if we are asked to share something, there is always this undertone that suggests we should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute. which we are, of course, but I'm thankful for the opportunity to share. But generally speaking, this does remind me of the times when indigenous knowledge was taken by colonizers. They are repackaged and profited from without any sense of reciprocity. So again, very extractive in nature. So in this email back to that person, I was just being open. So going back here, so what does integration actually look like? If we truly want to integrate indigenous perspectives, I think we need more than footnotes and representation. The footnotes we have in our research. We need the transformation, and I think that's the call I wanted to make, that when we, it's more about inclusion, it's more about transformation. So that begins with starting with the systemic self-awareness, that we are aware we live in this kind of system. So we question the structure, structure of the thing we're participating in, who benefits and who is left out, who gets credited and who gets paid. So we should raise this kind of question. Number two, we can also redefine value and return. So when we talk about publishing a paper or giving a talk, this shouldn't or cannot be the only return for the years of intellectual labor that a researcher can get, that a PhD student can get, that an indigenous person like us can get in our fight for inclusion. So there must be a more reciprocal exchange between institutions and knowledge holders. So yeah, that goes to my third point, which is to compensate and recognize participants. So I'm talking about the people being interviewed or engaged in research. They are not just data sources, so they are co-creators. Again, I repeat, they are co-creators. So they deserve honoraria, if possible, recognition, not just in footnotes, but also access to the outcomes, and say in how their knowledge is used. I think I also met some people who also ask for permission. Oh, should we use this in this area? That's where most of us know the consenting. And number four, I think, what does integration actually look like? It refuses extractive practices. So we can always say no to calls that ask for free labor without giving anything back. We can push for ethical standards. And of course, last but not the least, we can always embody indigenous principles, not just in theory, but in practice, in policy, and in process. And that's why I'm also very thankful for this platform, because not often do you talk about integrating indigenous perspective in academia. And this kind of talks and discussion is a gateway to start talking about this awareness that I just mentioned. So when we say practice, policy, and process, and when we talk about indigenous principles, I'm referring to the relationality, our interconnectedness, responsibility, and also the principle of give and take. Okay, so to conclude, I would just want to say once again that to integrate indigenous perspective is not to extract knowledge from them, but it is to honor and embody this threefold principle. Number one is the mindset that is grounded in relationality and community, a responsibility to protect and empower the whole, not just the self, and a lived ethic of reciprocity, which counters greed and sustains life. Because these are not only theoretical ideas, they are actually practices. In our indigenous communities, they are already embedded in our system. So there are practices, there are values, and there are worldviews that have enabled indigenous people to survive, to adapt, and to protect life system, including our environment, despite the centuries of colonization and disruption, and despite our being erased in history books, and despite being discriminated over time and over again. So these principles, they offer not only an alternative to extractive ways of knowing, but a pathway toward a more ethical, sustainable, and regenerative future. So that's it for my presentation for now, and I give it back to you, Lisa. And if there's anything, you can always contact me through this one. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Myra, for this. Let's have a short round of questions from the audience for clarification. If you can type your question in the chat, then we can hand them over to Myra. As Neele already mentioned, there will be more time for ample discussion towards the end, but if for now you have a short clarification question for Myra, please let us know. Perhaps in the meantime, if some people are still digesting, I can already begin introducing our second speaker for today, who is Moné Vasquez. I have to go back to my notes here to make sure I don't forget anything. Moné is a PhD candidate here at the Freie Universität as well, and researches the impacts of colonialism and the coloniality of nature and power within Mapuche territories in Chile. This is also from where Moné is greeting us today. And Moné's work mostly explores the historical but also ongoing processes of land grabbing, state-led assimilation policies, and mostly the socio-environmental challenges related to energy transitions, food systems, and land and water access. Their work is especially characterized by participatory and decolonial methodologies, something that we have already heard in Myra's presentation now. So Moné works in a way that really centers the Mapuche community's perspectives, but that also supports and uplifts their struggles for self-determination and molds or attempts to challenge dominant narratives. So in that broader sense, Moné's work also contributes to wider conversations around Indigenous rights, socio-environmental justice, and sustainable futures. I'm having a quick look at the chat, except for praise. We have no, there is one question coming in, or more question coming in. Let's have a quick look at that, and then we can hand over to Moné to present. So two brief clarification questions here. For Myra, do you have experience incorporating Indigenous communities already at the stage of funding acquisition? Because so this question was posed by Mario, that of course a lot of times this is a struggle, because if there is no funding in the project, then it becomes difficult to also remunerate people for their work, right? So do you have any concrete experience with that already in the stage of funding acquisition, writing grant proposals?
I have experience in writing grant proposals. And so far, now that the incorporating Indigenous communities at this stage, yeah, thankfully, previously, it's always a struggle. Well, until now, it's always a struggle to actually apply for funding, unless it is... Now, look, the funding that are available right now, when you see they are more in certain fields like creative industry, but there's really nothing about only with regards to Indigenous communities or Indigenous knowledge. Yeah, there's no funding that's like directly applied to that. So when we apply for funding, which we did recently, it's always tied with, of course, institutions that are more into this space of creative industry, of it's not in engineering, that they try to combine creative and design, or like reparations and this kind of concept in that area. But so far, before there was difficulty in even partnering with institutions for this kind of studies, but recently we see some kind of more like an openness wherein, oh yeah, let's collaborate. So there is this increasing awareness, I guess, and that leads to an increased warm welcome. So yeah, please join us, please collaborate with us. And so I think that's the reason why we can apply for grants and also work with other institutions and other organizations as well. But yeah, you're right, Mario. That remains a big barrier. And by the way, yes, please. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I forgot I had to cross out the name on the letter that I post. Please, in the recording, we can cut that out. Yeah, thank you so much, Mario, for pointing that out. Yeah.
Does that answer your question for you for now, Mario? If not, then maybe we can circle back to it in the discussion. All right. And then Freya also has a very interesting question coming from the position of someone who's a student and not necessarily yet somebody who can work with funding and with grants. So what could reciprocity look like in this context of academia when you are a student and you are asked to do small interviews and field work for very, very short courses? Is that a possibility at all? What do you think?
Yes. Interestingly, I also met a lot of students, master student, and me as a master student before. I understand that as a student, you don't have this kind of funding. But, you know, as a master student or as a student, we also have to kind of change our mindset in a way that, oh, we write our thesis, we write our assignment just to submit and just to have a grade. Period, right? But if we kind of like expand that a little bit, that, hey, I want to write this topic. Okay, I interview, let's say, okay, about indigenous or about migrants or whoever, whatever topic you're involved with. You write about this topic as a master student. Please don't just end up in the grade or then nothing else. You write a very important topic that you're passionate about. Then see to it also that you think a bit further long term, that you write it in a way that, oh, this I would like to submit it also in a journal. So it could be published in a journal and it can be read by more. I think for me, that's also kind of a reciprocity where you kind of give back to the cause that you are passionate about, or the topic that you want to explore and so on. Or if not in a journal, at least write an article about it and have the press cover it. Because I think master students, PhD students, you are all experts in your own field and you deserve much more. I think we deserve much more than a grade by a professor. Your work has to be expanded. And I think for me, if you are gonna research more about indigenous communities and you interview me as an indigenous person, I would be very happy to share everything to you, as long as we co-create. Apart from adding me in your paper as your source of information, not just the literal, that would be great. The thing about research is that professors always ask, it should be a primary resource. And what is a primary resource? Oh, those international journals, those journals. Then when you talk about indigenous communities, do you think you can find them in those international journals? I mean, their insights, do you think you can find them but you interview them, that's their first hand information. But then probably if you add it in your footnote or resources, your professor will not even consider it as a primary resource. So those kind of small things. But yeah, in terms of reciprocity, we can co-create with your master thesis. Make sure we have that read not only by your professor and just for you to have a grade, but also for the world, the community to benefit from the knowledge you have studied. I hope that answers your question, Freya.
Maybe Freya can give a thumbs up somewhere, or if not, we circle back to it. Perhaps also as a side note on that of course a lot of the universities, the ethics committees or guidelines are different, and I think especially the FU's ethics guidelines are, well, very, very limited. Let's just phrase it like that, because across the US or North America, for instance, if for your research you are not able to develop actually a long-standing relationship with the indigenous communities that you want to work with, then your research is not even going to be passed by the ethics test. So for small courses, you would not even be allowed to do interviews with indigenous peoples if you're not able to, really forge long-standing relationships. So yeah, there's also but these larger structures around where perhaps the FU, maybe somebody's listening or watching this at another point, could hopefully think about that more in detail. Yes, so thanks a lot for this first small question round. Then we're gonna wrap this up for now and move over to Moné. So Moné, floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I also wanted to say something about the reciprocity, because there is different ways of reciprocity, not only, like to have funding, but also to give back the information, for example. That is a very important thing that I think if you work with Indigenous people, you should always do. And I know, because I have been there, bachelor, master, and now my PhD, sometimes we don't have the funding to look for a small funding, or to look for a small, to look for collaborators. I think that that's for me has been the key, to look for collaborators that will be, helping you to find ways that sometimes it's not always money, but to find ways to get that information, or try to translate it to Indigenous language. These things I think are also very important and meaningful for the Indigenous peoples. So I'm gonna start my presentation now, but I just wanted to mention these kind of things that sometimes we always think about only money, and money is very important in a capital world, but also to think about other ways of reciprocity and giving back to Indigenous peoples. Is this one the right one?
Yes, on our end at least it's fine. Yes, thanks.
Yeah. So I hope that after this presentation you can understand what is Indigenous knowledge. I'm gonna introduce a little bit of the Mapuche knowledge and why we must recognize it in our work. So I want to ask you to critically think about sustainability, for example, development projects, progress, energy transition. If energy transition is actually part of environmental justice, or is like another treason of the capital world, and especially because what the global north is doing and like thinking about energy transition is not what the global south is experiencing about this. And it's the same when we think about, for example, sustainability projects. And are Indigenous people part of this, dialogue, this discussion, especially because Indigenous people are the protectors of the 85% of the biodiversity globally. So when we speak about sustainability, are we really thinking that is sustainability for all, or is only, again, for the global north? So this is something that I want you to think about it, to critically think. I'm not saying that every project is wrong, but to just think about if these concepts are for all, or again for a few. In our last work, we have been working with the Mapuche ancestral land, which is Walmapu. Tabumen, it means kind of the borders. So here, for example, you can see, if you follow my this thing, you can see, for example, that these are the borders of the Walmapu territory, and then you find the Puelmapu and Gulumapu. If you see the map, it's like a turning around, because for the Mapuche people, and this is part of the Mapuche knowledge, the Indigenous knowledge, where the sun is coming out is where the north is. So this is for us the north, this is the south, and this is like the west, and this is the east. And why I'm starting with this, because territory is very important. The land is very important for the Indigenous people. So when we think about the Mapuche people, we have to also think about this deep connection with the land. We have to think about that is not the borders that we know today, but the borders have been like erased in the these colonial maps that we have today, which it will be today Argentina and Chile. I work with the Lafkenche people and also the Pehuenche people. The Lafkenche people are the people from the sea, and the Pehuenche people are people from the mountain, and also from the Pehuen, which means the Araucaria is ancestral tree, I will say, because it has thousands of years. And we did, thanks to actually the ASI funding, we did this work that is counter mapping. You can see behind these these bubbles what they spoke about when I asked like what is territory for you. So, and I want to to think along with you that territory is very different for each other. So for example, territory for the Lafkenche people, the people from the sea, is community, is a safe space, independency, Mapuche economy and food, the Lafken and the Mapu, and the Lafken Mapu. Water, land, native forest, sea, and alga food. Part of us, and we are part of her. We are territory, matter home, living together and in harmony and cooperation and solidarity. So what you see here is that the values, but also the connection is very deep. That's why I wanted to start with this, because the knowledge systems are sustained in values, are sustained in language, are sustained in cosmovision and culture. And indigenous science is science. Many times we have seen by the Western world white supremacy or colonial, like kind of ongoing patterns that people don't think that indigenous people have any science. In general, indigenous science and indigenous knowledge have been transmitted orally. And there is different ways of, knowledge kind of transmission, but unfortunately, the only one who have been, kind of taken into account is the greeting. So that's why, for example, in colonial times, we still have this thing that if you write your story and if you write what you see, what you and this kind of protocols, then you're fine. But what about like a orally transmitted science, especially because, for example, here we have a woman, a Mapuche woman, working in Ahuitral. It's a waving, I would say, it's a waving science that is not just like to wave because the wall because you want to like make new clothes, but it has a whole science that it comes with dreams. It comes with like again connection to the territory and what you want to say. There is a language also in the waving. So this is also indigenous science. Indigenous knowledge in the case of the Mapuche people and many others, but I'm gonna like present here the Mapuche people, is through observation, through listening, thinking and feeling, and this comes with the with the foundation of language, culture, and knowledge. And here we see like next to that the Mapuche knowledge, it has an oral tradition that it comes, for example, with the Kimche, that is this wisdom person that passed through like generations the cosmovision. But this is connected to nature. So, and is connected to the Mapuzungun, which is the language. When we speak the language, the Mapuzungun, you are speaking the language of nature because it has a lot of, I don't know how to say it in English, but onomatopoeia. So for example, you hear for example, the truf and the truful is like when water goes down, like, so a cascade. So it's because of the sound of nature or like different things come and speak to you, And all of these are like connected to the territory. I also want to say that diversity is the center. Mapuche people, like even within the Lafkenche people, you see a lot of diversity in the ways of being, in the ways of doing. But this is pretty much respected. Not like, for example, in the Western world, I have seen that we are quite very much homogenized, or like in general, people are very much homogenized. But in the case of the Mapuche people, there is plenty of diversity, and this is at the center, and it's respected where values are common. For example, to respect and to protect the forest, the native forest. So this is something that we are gonna have, like as a vision and as a common value. And again, there is oral tradition. The knowledge system of the Mapuche people is the Kimeltuun, and for this, you need to develop the Che. So the Che is the being a person. And this is not something individual, but it's something that is communal, collective, and again, coming with nature and territorial. So it's like people have their own values, their own system, needs, and priorities. There is within the Mapuche knowledge, there is like a economy system, education system. There is also like nature and community that come together, health, political. There is different things. For example, the political system, living in communities with ancestral authorities, is the lonco, the huerquén, the dirigente. The health system is not only for physical health, like you are going to a hospital, but the machi, the lahuentuchefe, they also see the physical, mental, and spiritual health. It's much more, like, the concept that sometimes people say is holistic, or I would say more complete. The education system is based in the language, and the origin is given by nature again. And you find for example, that there is a lot of geographers, people, that are expert in forest conservation, also sea conservation. There is people that are expert in astronomy, climatologists, water defenders, and I put also this weaving and artisans, seed knowledge and trading communal work. And these are done by the Kimte, like I said before, so this wisdom person, but also by the Kimeltuchefe, which will be like a kind of a docent. Grandparents, parents, and other family members. As you can see, it's like a cooperation, and it's like not only one person, and it's not like this hierarchical world, but it's more like a horizontal thing. And the economy system is like, for example, the recollection of forest herbs, of food, subsistence agriculture, exchange of seeds, protecting of seeds for agriculture, cooperation, and solidarity. I also try to incorporate in this presentation that cooperation and solidarity are part of the economic system and the values, because the values are very important all the time. For the knowledge system, we have in the Mapuche people that the Asmapu are like kind of the norms of Mother Earth, and these have to be respected. And the Asmapu are not only the norms of Mother Earth, but also the norms of the territory. So each territory has to have like a balance to live in harmony and to comply with this. And here you see different things. For example, the Come Muñen is like what is in, for example, other Andean communities to live well, or the Buen Vivir. The Kimun is the wisdom. And here you have like different things that are objects of knowledge, as for example, the Peuma, which are the dreams, the natural environment, and the spiritual forces, which are also part of this. By all of these and the, for example, social cultural ceremonies, people learn from each other, and learn with the territory. Here I'm going to give you a little bit of practice about how we have been working together with the Mapuche people and with the Mapuche knowledge. And the first thing for example, I did and I do every time is to ask for permission to ancestral leaders and authorities. Then, if that goes well, we call for a general meeting, asking their needs, asking for communal and territorial struggles that they have, and that we can be at service of, like our skills can be at service of their work, the work that we want to do together, are a priority. Active listening and mutual respect are key, and to be respectful and open. And here I'm going to say something that I know that for the Western world, this is very difficult, but times are different. And language and knowledge are very different and are very important. So for you to understand that even if, for example, in Chile, we speak a kind of Spanish, but it's not the same that if you speak Mapuzungun, because there are many things that cannot be translated. So it's important also that hopefully you find a facilitator that can help you to, deeply understand some words or some of the language, and to also incorporate in your work, in your practice. Like I said before, putting your knowledge and person at service and presenting your idea or research, considering their needs and struggles, are something very important. Work with a diverse group of people, not only men, not only women, is important. Also to avoid conflicts and making conflicts, because sometimes you have like something in mind, but it's going to be very different from what like the communities or the indigenous people want to do or they need. So you need to really consider your practice and what you want to work for. And the most important thing is that while working with indigenous people, reciprocity is very important. Respect, mutual understanding, active listening by you, humility. Don't think that you're an expert. And taking care of the social, I call it social tissue, but in English, I think it's social cohesion, is something very important, especially in times of, there is so much violence happening in general in indigenous territories, that this is something that you need to take care. There is also like a lot of ongoing colonization by a new evangelization, if I can say it, by the evangelic church in Mapuche, for example, territory, that the communities are being separated from their cosmovision, from their language, and for many things. So this is something that you need to consider, to really look and understand what is happening also in the territory that you're working. And I want to finalize my presentation with this. There is a community leader that I'm not going to disclose his name, but he said, you cannot design a future of well-being and happiness by destroying a whole chain of livelihood existing in nature. Nature, if in harmony, gives us all what we need. The only way of defending our livelihood is through the defense of our territories and cosmovision. But by doing so, we put our lives at risk. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Moné. It's always a shame on Zoom that one cannot hear the clapping, although I'm sure everybody is clapping at home or wherever they are for both your presentation and Myra's. So we have also made a bit more time for both of your presentations, which I think was very important to do that, so that you can really bring the points across that are important. So let's first have a quick round of clarification questions for Moné, and then we can move into a more plenary discussion. So we already have one question coming in, one by Freya. If you could perhaps explain a little bit more what you mean by no, I think the question is more what the Mapuche cosmovision is, or is the question how to understand cosmovision? Perhaps Freya can briefly clarify their question.
Yeah. So for the Western world, this is like a philosophy of life, you know. I don't know how to translate it in another language, but cosmovision, the Mapuche cosmovision, is it's like the ways of living, but also thinking and feeling, you know, it's kind of coming all together, but I don't really know how to translate it very quickly to answer this question, because this could be for a very long also talk. Is this clear?
Let's see if Freya gives a thumbs up. Let's see. Not seeing a thumbs, but we may have to take the silence for contention. But perhaps Freya adds, if you could share a little bit more what the cosmovision of the Mapuche people is, if this is something that you can say in a very quick nutshell.
I think it's living with the territory in harmony. If I can, you know, translate it in very simple words, for you to understand. And it's coming also with what I mentioned before, the Asmapu. So there is a three concept, that is the Asmapu, the Itrofolmonien, and the Kumemonien. And these all are very much connected, that are, for me to live good, I have to do good, you know, and to live good within the territory, within Mother Nature. So this is like, yeah, is this like, if I can take a,
I think that almost relates to and to some extent relates to another question that we're seeing at the moment. If you could elaborate a bit more on people's relationship with nature and forms of spirituality that there may be expressed in that. Are you able to see the questions as well in your chat, Moné?
Yeah, I was wondering. Okay, but this is a little bit, yeah, I mean, for us, this is coming with the te, so with the being a person, and it's very, it's kind of something that is coming from inside us, you know. You can also learn, but I don't know, it's part of something that we have in our blood, to say it, you know. But the questions are very difficult, because are mainly about this spirituality aspect, you know, because cosmovision is spiritual as well. So the relationship with nature.
Can I also add about the cosmovision thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think at this point, since also we're not running out of time yet, but getting close, so we can open this simply to discussion. So please chime in, Myra.
Yeah, I just want to add that, of course, when we talk about cosmos, a vision of the cosmos, when we talk about cosmos, we're basically talking about the universe, and the universe as a whole is really harmonious. So there's always balance there. If we talk about nature, yeah, the natural state of things is always balance in harmony. And when we indigenous communities talk about this cosmovision, it's more like what Moné said, that our interconnectedness, not only with human and human, but also humans and nature and the environment we live in, and also the land. So just like what I've also mentioned, what you do to the nature around you or to the land affects you, yeah, because of this web of interconnection that we have. And so that also goes with the cultural practices. In many indigenous communities, ceremonies are very important. Cultural practices are very important. Songs and dances play a major role. Why? Because that connects us to our spirituality, which sometimes it's difficult to explain, like Moné said, because it's only between you and the superior being that created everything else around us, including nature. Yeah, so there's this kind of like more holistic feeling with the universe. So again, yeah, it's not only with human, but also with our cultural practices and our existence as living creatures. So yeah, it's connected with spirituality, because in the Western world, when we talk about spirituality, we kind of like equate it to like something that is crazy, or it's not within their vocabulary of what is sane, or what is, you know, to be even considered a scientific knowledge, right? But when we see a cosmovision, it's really the interconnectedness of everything. Hope that helps. Yeah. Thanks.
Yes, thanks to both of you for this. So I see also in the chat already, we're definitely moving towards discussion. I think for now there is no clarification questions from Monet. And Andres has already posed a super interesting question for both of you to reflect on. So what are the implications for Indigenous knowledge and its integration when members of Indigenous communities, such as the two of you, attend Western universities that are Western institutions, are implicated in colonial structures, etc. What are your thoughts on this?
I can start. Yeah, okay. I have thoughts on that, because we already experienced that. Moné, me, and other indigenous people here. We don't come here just to live, but we also come here to integrate ourselves in a modern society. And so far, our experience, for example, being able to come here, okay, learn the culture at the same time, and also go to universities and learn in the way that education is being taught at universities. Being part of this kind of modern developed country is a very interesting experience, and then bringing with us our collectivist mindset and culture and indigenous perspective. I think when you ask about what are the implications for indigenous knowledge, that brings me back to our vision of a cosmovision, or the interconnectedness, because we come here, so we come with our indigenous perspective, with our culture, traditions. But as you can see, it's not a dual thing, but I would just say in the Western world is individualist in nature, and in non-Western world is collectivist in nature. So you have these two kind of societies with two kinds of mindset. So one is more community focused, and the other one is individual focused. But there's nothing wrong with any of these two. And us coming in here and coming in universities, it's a very good opportunity to kind of share this kind of perspective and this kind of worldview in such a way that we hope to find a balance between the two. What can we get from the indigenous perspective? At the same time, what can we get from the individualist Western perspective, wherein it could help us provide solutions to current problems? Like, we can even say, how can we combine these two perspectives in a way that we can address migration, in a way that we can address, societal issues? And even as we move towards a very technology-driven society, as we build in a digital future, how can we make use of this indigenous perspective of reciprocity? We're talking about give and take, a kind of mentality, this kind of thinking where we look at the interests of community, this kind of thinking of there should be no harm as much as possible. So from that question, I'd say, like, yes, I think we have something to share, and it's good that we can have this kind of conversation. So also to figure out, yeah, indeed, what are you bringing on the table? Yeah, it's like, how can we put this together? And it's a very good question. Moné?
Yeah, I agree with you, Myra. I mean, I think it also creates a lot of opportunities, also tensions. I mean, when I went to Europe, it was very difficult also to understand like language. As for example, I started like living in Germany and then like the Netherlands, and the language is very important, when you live in a country, to learn. But it's also very difficult because it has like a logic that is very different from our logic, and our sentipensar as well. And also like these things that everything is, you know, like you learn, but you learn always from a teacher that is in front of you, telling you what you have to say or what you have to do. Like even when you critically think about this, it's not also our way of learning. It's like also through observation, you go to the forest and you see yourself and you listen and you are there, you know, you are present. And when I went to Europe, this was for me like, you know, very surprising, the ways of learning. Also like what you say, the individualistic approach, that even like, for example, working in transdisciplinarity is very difficult because always there is a person that try to impose, you know, what is transdisciplinarity, but also how you have to work. And that one knowledge is upfront, and not this kind of combination of knowledge and this kind of discussion, like fruitful discussions and dialogue that you can have to make this research more comprehensive and inclusive. So these are things that I have been like, these are my tensions. These are my also my learning opportunities, because I don't see it as something wrong, but as something that, you know, I need to learn, and I think we have to learn, but also I have my own practice, and I try to also always think about like, and try to remember, you know, how to go back to who I am, without so much assimilation. Because yeah, when you're living in a place, you have all the time this kind of assimilation to feel included in society, to feel included in certain spaces, in academia, for example. But let's try to not forget who we are and where we are coming from. I hope I can answer that question.
I'm very sure Andres is satisfied with that answer from the two of you. If not, then please let us know now. I think the last part that you mentioned, Moné, also partly links, or from one perspective at least links to another question that we have in the chat by Gregor on what could be the potential. In what ways can potential contradictions between indigenous knowledges, ways of being, and then the Western more positive science on the one hand be seen as opportunities for dialogue or learning also, as you mentioned now, rather than conflict? Not sure if you want to continue speaking, reflecting on that, Moné, or if Myra wants to go first.
I think, Myra, you mentioned some of these things. For example, how Western science tends to like be objective, you know, and to replicate, but also to quantify. You were mentioning this in your presentation.
Yeah.
Well, for example, indigenous knowledge is more like experiential, and is relational, is grounded, and in also long-term relation and observation. And I think these are things that, instead of feeling that these are conflict, these are things that we can learn from each other, and we can try to include, not to only integrate, but to include in research.
Yeah, definitely. And while I was listening to the question, it reminds me a little bit, because I kind of remember of something, because you mentioned about how could this be opportunities for dialogue rather than conflict. And I could imagine where the conflict thing is coming from, because for indigenous communities in general, we have always been a victim of, let's say, you know, this colonialism, of course, the extraction of many things from indigenous communities, not only are the lands, not only our values and things, but a lot of things. So you're being erased from history. So this caused a lot of pain. So when you try to meet, of course, if you look at the context of colonizer versus colonized, and of course I'm talking about like Western colonization and of course the colonized person, if you put them together, certainly there will always be a conflict because there are still a lot of historical wrongs that were not corrected or were not addressed. So there's still a lot of healing to go on. So when you put them together, definitely there's still that tension and conflict. And I could imagine, of course, the other side would require for reparations. They would ask for healing. They will ask. But the thing is that the people nowadays, we who live nowadays, or not the generations where this strong colonization took place, it's not our fault. I mean, the generation nowadays is not their fault, but could there still be a way to do reparation in the historical wrongs that has been done in these communities? I think the answer would be yes. And I think when it comes to dialogue, this is where the dialogue comes in, because both parties are coming in together as like, oh, we try to be neutral, we try to be objective, we try to be able to find the solution for these things. And I think there's still a potential for more opportunities for dialogue, and it's indeed really possible. The question is, are we ready for it? Or would we welcome it? Or would we just say, no, I don't, I don't recognize. So, but if we welcome it, I think definitely it would be great opportunities for a dialogue. Hope that answers the question, Gregor. Yeah, thanks.
Great. All right. There's one more question in the chat that I'm going to pose. And since we are also moving towards the end, after this question, we will only have space for one more question. So if there is anything you would still like to know from our two presenters, please put it in the chat now. So the question here states, in the indigenous communities that the two of you are working with, is there a single spirit or being in everything? So more, let's say, monotheistic, let's say, or are there distinct spirits inhabiting different aspects of nature? How is that working in the Mapuche territories that you are working with, Moné? And how is it for the Igorot families that you are living with, Myra?
Yeah. Myra, can I start?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I think all the questions about spirituality and also cosmovision for me are very intimate, you know. If I can start saying that, I'm gonna answer this question from, you know, like my experience. And yeah, in the spiritual world, we see a spirit, for example, everywhere. So there is a volcano, there is a spirit there. There is like a trees or like a forest, and there is a lot of spirits also there. You know, when you see a native forest, and not, for example, forest plantations of pinus or eucalyptus, then you see, for example, in the pinus or eucalyptus, you see like a lot of death because there is nothing growing, you know, like under, but there only the tree. But for example, for the native forest, you see a lot of life and water, you know, coming back. And with that, you see also like a lot of spirits. So every element is a spirit. Sometimes you can see it or not, because there is also like animal spirits that are not, you know, like live anymore, but are also there. But like I say before, these are intimate questions that I'm answering according to my experience and to my life. And one thing about spirituality is that it's very different than religion, you know. That I want to just say it because I have been asked, you know, what is the Mapuche religion? And I'm like, what is the Mapuche religion? I have no idea, you know, because we don't have a religion. It's a cosmovision. It's you know, like it's a spiritual thing. So it's very different. And I just wanted to mention that before, you know, we have this mistake with mixing religion with spirituality.
Myra, do you want to add something
to add?
on this
Yeah,
question?
definitely. Definitely, because I totally agree. It's a very intimate question. It's also a personal one, and our experience are different from each other. But in general, of course, for indigenous community, I from the Igorot community, say for example, we don't see it as a single spirit, but more of like a multiple spirit, because we also call it like our ancestral spirit, the spirits of the nature, like what you said, Moné. It's like there is a life in every living thing around us, and you may call that a spirit. Some there's this kind of vibration, or you could also say a spirit, but some may call it like sort of an energy, the vibes. You could say, is that a spirit? It's up to you to define it. But for me, everything around us that is a living being is indeed a spirit or an energy, or a sort of like something where you can that you can connect with, either something that you can connect with to speak to your inner being from around you, or something you connect with your ancestors, something that you can connect with the nature around us. Yeah, and you're totally right. Spirituality is not equated with religion. Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone already for your questions. We have one last question in our chat by Andres. Do the two of you know of any institution, either in Latin America or across the global south, in which an effective dialogue between knowledge systems, indigenous and quote unquote Western, are happening in a transformational way? Is there anyone that you can think of?
I think it depends what is effective and what is transformational. Like, how do we find effective? Effective in solving societal problems, or effective in integrating indigenous culture or knowledge in the academe? So far, I think what I've seen so far, I don't know, or I haven't partnered or collaborated with one specific institution in the global south, but definitely we are in touch with grassroots organizations that are having their own respective initiatives when it comes to increasing this kind of dialogue. But you know what? What is interesting is that from my experience, for example, in the community where I live in the Philippines, the Igorot communities, this kind of dialogues don't happen, because in that community they're already kind of like familiar, they know already. So it's for them, it's like, oh, this is normal, this is what is this is how it should be, this is how it should work. But of course, here in the Western world, as we integrate this kind of perspective, that's where the dialogue comes in, because this is the place where you really have to raise this kind of awareness, and whether it can be used in an effective way, transformational way, towards finding balance or finding solutions. Are there institutions doing that? I'd say there are grassroots initiatives here in the Netherlands, at least, that we are starting to work with. All grassroots, small institutions, not big ones. Moné, you?
I think this is a very good question. Also because I think, for example, even if we think about, I don't know, intercultural programs, in my case, I think are grown and insufficient, because they have been like being made under, this Western colonial logic. So when I think about this, I also think about like certain projects, and also like about your question, Andres. I think about your question, sorry, and there is like certain projects in Oaxaca, in Mexico, also in Chiapas with Zapatistas. There is an intercultural, like a cultural university from the pueblos in Colombia, and also in the nucleus for Amazonian indigenous people. And I think they are doing things that are more in dialogue, but still the Western logic is pretty much present. Like, for example, in these intercultural programs or like even intercultural policies that we thought that it was a good thing, you know, for example, in Bolivia and Ecuador. But when you see the practice and that then there is something that I think needs to be done with more dialogue, with more understanding also of how the indigenous diversity also needs to be like included there, and also how to really work in these cultural programs together, you know, because yeah. Just to like grab a little bit, what we see now is that the Western logic is everywhere, you know, like in even if in health intercultural programs, in educational intercultural programs, and for example, in Chile, you see that to speak about educational system or programs, the Chilean state started to include the Mapuzungun, but unfortunately, this is not the only way, because we also need like a different curriculum, a curriculum that would be like meant for the Mapuche children, as we actually teach children, you know. So, and this intergenerational thing, it should be like also there. And we see more and more that the individualistic approach, you know, like for example, that the grandparents are very far away now from the grandkids, and that you know, this kind of social cohesion is getting more and more into this Western logic than what it used to be like before. So I hope that I can also give you a little bit of practical, you know, like understanding of how, you know, how this is and why it's so difficult, but at the same time why we need to learn and also include indigenous voices, indigenous knowledge, and also indigenous practices and dialogue in every single thing that we are doing to promote also, you know, social environmental justice and to promote better futures for all.
Thank you. I think Moné has just actually delivered the perfect closing statement also for the session today. I think there's actually nothing else that we could add to that. So yeah, thanks everybody for being here today. Special thanks, of course, to Moné and Myra for their time, for their presentations, for answering questions so generously. As Neele mentioned in the beginning, if you want to have a look at some more of the ASI events and the SDG Academy, you can get in touch with them. Sure, there's a newsletter to sign up. So yes, Neele is also posting some more info on future events here right now that may be interesting to all of you. But yeah, thanks a lot for being here, for your questions and open ears, and hopefully also open minds to take all that into the future. And yeah, thanks to everybody, and maybe see you at some other moment in life again.